Good morning. Good morning, Croatians, Bosnians, and Albania American communities. Let me begin by welcoming and acknowledging some of our dignitaries that are here with us today. Let's give a round of applause to Councilwoman Carolina Rivera, Assemblywoman Natalia Fernandez, Ambassador William Walker. There is no other place I would rather be today than here with you, united like we've never been before, stronger than we've ever been before in our quest for justice. We are strong because Vasfia is strong. We are strong because Sheretia is strong. We are strong because Bakria is strong. They are survivors because they refuse to give up their fight for justice, and nor should we. I share with you an incident and an experience of mine this past April while in Pristina. I've experienced and seen suffering before, but never like that. Because it was that day that I looked into the crowd of hundreds of women that were gathered, that I saw pain, that I saw uncontrollable shaking that would not stop, that I saw tears that could not be wiped away. It's those faces and those emotions that I experienced that day that were burned into memory. A day that I'll never forget. Because too often when we speak of conflict-related sexual violence, we frequently refer to data. We use numbers, statistics, and geography in an attempt to tell a story. However, what we often fail to portray is that we are speaking of people whose lives are changed forever. I've seen that misery and stigma they live with, but I've also witnessed their strength, courage, and spirit. It's decades later, and some of you may think the wars in the Balkans are over. But for nearly 70,000 survivors of sexual violence in Bosnia, Croatia, and Kosovo, the war never ended. For them, it continues to this day. Decades later, they wake up each morning knowing that the perpetrators of those horrible war crimes walk around enjoying the benefits of life, thinking and believing that they got away with the most outrageous crime against humanity, rape. These heinous atrocities were committed under the Serbian flag and are today worn as badges of honor. Well, we're here today to tell them, your time is up. Your days are numbered. We are coming for you. We will find you and bring you before justice to be judged for your crimes. What do you want? Justice. What do you want? Justice. What do you want? Justice. When do you want it? Now. When do you want it? Now. We're going to let them know that they're going to be judged in this lifetime by us, and we'll leave it to God Almighty to judge them in the afterlife. I want these criminals to hear you loud and clear. I want them to hear that Vasfia, Shereta, Bakria, and the tens of thousands of other women are not alone anymore. Together we stand with these survivors. stronger and more committed than ever before. With them, we will not stop our quest until the Serbian government brings to justice every single one of those criminals. As the old African proverb goes, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And together, we are going far. With our survivors, Albanians, Bosnians, Croatians, Americans, and citizens around the world, we will bring to justice our war criminals and end the use of rape as a weapon of war now and forever. We will not stop. We will use every tool at our disposal to force the government of Serbia to do the right thing and moral thing, to find these cowards, to prosecute these criminals, and to make restitutions to all of the victims. Because Serbia refuses to acknowledge, refuses to apologize, refuses to prosecute and make restitutions, we call on the international community to do so. We call on the European Union, the United States, and the United Nations and our international communities to act now. What do we want? Now. What do we want?
Now.
When do you want it?
Now.
When do you want it?
Now.
There are so many things that our governments and world leaders can do, but there are things that we, as citizens, can do, that you can do. Let's start by refusing to buy or purchase any Serbian products, boycotting all Serbian products and services until the day that Serbia stops denying the atrocities that were committed, stops covering up the crimes that were committed, ends the protection it offers these criminals, and finally brings them to justice. Ladies and gentlemen, there is so much at stake here. Bringing these horrible criminals to justice is not and should not be a Bosnian, a Kosovan, a Croatian problem. This is a human rights problem, a worldwide problem. Our reaction to this injustice will define who we are. We will be judged by our own inactions. Silence is not acceptable. In Mother Teresa's own words, there is nothing more calming in difficult moments than knowing that there is someone fighting for you. We cannot be numb to rape and sexual violence. We cannot be deaf to injustice. We cannot accept rape as a normal part of war. We must all stand up and speak up, using our voices to say that women's bodies cannot be used as a battlefield. Rape victims are not a casualty of war, and do everything in our power to end rape and sexual violence. Let us continue to unite. Let us speak loud so all free nations of the world can hear. Let us never give up. As a proud Albanian American, as a citizen of this world, I will be with you every step of the way. You inspire me, and I promise you, together we will win this fight. God bless you, God bless our survivors, and God bless America.
USA! 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 USA!
What do you want? What do you want?
Justice!
Say it so they hear you in that building. What do you want? When do you want it?
Now!
Let me bring up our first speaker, New York City Councilwoman Carlina Rivera. I'm proud to introduce a friend and a leader in the New York City Council, someone who fights daily for women's rights in New York City and beyond. She's the co-chair of the New York City Women's Caucus, Councilwoman Carolina Rivera. We're grateful that you are here. Thank you for joining us at this rally for her justice in support of these women and survivors. Let's give it up for Councilwoman Carlina Rivera.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. My name is Carlina Rivera. I am a New York City Councilwoman, proudly representing the Lower East Side. You know the history of the Lower East Side. It is a melting pot. It is where we have accepted people from all over the world, refugees and immigrants and people seeking a life where they will have dignity and respect. And why we are standing here together today is because for too long, many of our survivors have been disrespected and this atrocity has not been acknowledged. I want to thank everyone for being here today, including the Albanian American Women's Organization, my colleague, Council Member Mark Jonai, an incredible advocate, of course, the Assemblywoman who you'll hear from, and I have to say, as the co-chair of the New York City Women's Caucus, we condemn the unthinkable sexual violence that occurred during these wars from 1991 to 2001, 20 years later. And as we see here, these messages that justice should not be delayed. Justice delayed is justice denied. Often described as Europe's deadliest conflict since World War II, these wars were marked by many war crimes, including justice, crimes against humanity, unthinkable, unacceptable war crimes. We stand with the thousands of survivors of this horrific act. We denounce rape as a systemic crime against humanity in this conflict. In 2008, the United Nations passed Resolution 1820, which states that rape as a weapon during war is a war crime. In 2019, the United Nations passed Resolution 2467, making the state responsible for any war crimes committed in their territories. These resolutions, though they are crucial, have unfortunately left the international community for too many years without adequate tools to bring justice for the survivors of sexual violence. And that's why we are rallying here today. The silence surrounding the use of rape as a tool of war is deafening. For the last 20 years, most of the perpetrators of the sexual violence have faced no prosecution. But many of the survivors still regularly see their rapists in their local neighborhoods. That is unjust. That is why I'm standing here with all of the people to tell you that we have to acknowledge and recognize, and we have to deliver for the people of our communities. We are a global community. We must do better to believe, support, and bring justice for these survivors, some of whom are with us today and who you will hear from in a few moments. The trauma of sexual violence can continue even after wars end. We know the trauma, the mental health, the things that we have to provide, the programs and services. That is what we should be doing as legislators and as your representatives. And unfortunately, we know that justice is not inevitable. It takes all of us. It takes all of you here. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for standing with the survivors of this violence, amplifying their voices, amplifying their experiences. This rally today represents one small step towards long-awaited justice. And we are here with our colleagues in government, with advocates, with survivors, saying, no justice, no justice, no peace. And now I believe I'm going to bring up one of the survivors to share her experiences. I want to welcome the Albanian American Women's Organization, Motrat Kiriasi, represented by Ariana Elizaj. It's my pleasure to introduce and thank the organizers of today's rally, the Albanian American Women's Organization, Motrat Kiriasi, their president, Betty Beno, and their board members. AAWO is a voice for the Albanian American women in our community, and it works to lift the spirit, status, and the voice for so many. So please, let's give a warm welcome for all of the people here, especially our AAWO board member, Ariana Elizaj.
On behalf of the Albanian American Women's Organization, Smotra Qiriazi, I would like to thank each and every one of you who are here to spread the awareness, to break the silence, and to let the world know and understand what happened during the Serbian armed conflict against Albanian, ethnic, Croatian, Bosnian women, so that does not happen again to our sisters, mothers, and daughters. Over the last 20 years, the villains have become victims, while the victims have become villains. I was a few days ago to the Croatian church, and one of the ladies, Milka, she's in the attendance there, she said, "We are the quiet majority, and the villain and the evil minority is trying to overpower us. But not today. We are seeking justice for all our mothers, sisters, and daughters. This rally is about starting the conversation and reversing the trend. It is about searching for justice for survivors of the war crimes of sexual violence and helping them find the strength and courage to come forward and tell their stories. Rape used as a weapon during the war is a crime, and countries are responsible to hold the perpetrators of those crimes accountable. The victims of conflict-related sexual violence not only endured physical and psychological sufferings during the war, but they continue to suffer the long-term effect and stigma to this very day. We want to bring dignity and acceptance to the survivors, and as they integrate into the society, but foremost, we call upon the Serbian government to punish, to hold accountable the perpetrators of human rights violations against women and girls, because until then, justice is not served. We'll continue to work together to build coalitions and focus on the future by acknowledging the pain and suffering that happened in the past. Let us start the healing process together and be the voice for justice. There is no peace without justice. Justice delayed is justice denied. I want to thank Mrs. Vasfije Krasniqi Gutman for her courage and strength, and for being here today to be the voice of those who still endure pain in silence. I would like to thank Councilwoman Rivera. I would like to thank Assemblywoman Fernandez, Mr. Mark Jonai, who has been the strongest supporter of our cause, and first and foremost, Mrs. Engel, who has been here today to support our cause. And as you know, her husband, Elliot Engel, is our strongest advocate in the United States Congress. And I'd like to thank, in the name of the Albanian organization, Albanian American Women's Organization, Motra Qiriazi, all the speakers who are finding their strength to stand up for this good cause.
Thank you, Ariana. What do you want?
Justice!
What do you want?
Justice!
When do you want it?
Now!
During my last trip to Pristina, I took part at a ceremony honoring the survivors of sexual war crimes. I remember meeting a shiro that was radiating hope and courage to all. And I'm honored that this hero is with us today. Her voice has given hope to so many, and her testimony at the U.S. Congress has shown strength and courage to the world. Please let me welcome the first woman in Kosovo to speak openly about the atrocities of the Kosovo War, Vasfia Krstići Goodman.
Thank you. Dear audience, the reason we are gathered here today is to tell the world that even though you have forgotten what Serbia did in the 90s in former Yugoslavia, we, the ones that have suffered the most, we haven't forgotten. At the age of 16, I was abducted by a Serbian police officer and raped by an officer and a civilian. I seek justice in 1999. United Nations has failed me. EULEX has failed me. And 20 other thousand rape cases, including women, men, and children. We are here today to hold Serbia accountable for the crimes they have committed almost 30 years ago. To this day, they still deny those crimes. We will not have peace in the world without punishing the past criminals. My mission is to remind the world of the Serbian crimes. My mission is to go to every Serbian embassy all over the world until justice is delivered. I begged my perpetrator to kill me. He said, no, you will suffer more this way. But today, my voice will be the one that he will be punished. I will be telling the world of his crimes. I was proud to share my story at the U.S. Congress, at the Italian Parliament, at the Swedish Parliament, and I will not stop until my last breath to hold Serbia accountable for all those crimes they have committed. I want to thank the Albanian community for supporting me for the last year, ever since I shared my story with the public. Thank you all so much.
An incredibly strong and powerful woman. I'd like to acknowledge with us the presence of Shereta Tahiri Salmani. Her actions have given strength to ourselves and inspired good actions in others. Following the brave testimony of Vasfia Goodman, I'm humbled to introduce Shereta Tahiri Salamani. Only 2 weeks ago, she courageously filed a criminal complaint with Kosovo's Special Prosecution Office for war crimes against the perpetrators that sexually assaulted her. Let's give a real round of applause to Shereta Tahiri Salmani for her bravery, for her courage, for the powerful woman that she is and who she represents. Let's give her a round of applause. You know, an miku yon, amonu mi amor neren, e fanave tona, po më vërtet, ta janë neri ton, ta janë neri komi ton, gratë tona.
I want to say something, for sure. Thank you so much for taking time to being here with us and supporting us. It's very, very disturbing to be in front of them. And it's painful. But another side, I have so much courage. And I am so brave, braver than them. Yes. weren't brave then, and they are not brave now. They don't have no power over us. They thought they killed us, but they didn't. We are strong forever. Thank you so much for being here and sharing with you my experience. We want justice. I want justice for my sisters, mothers, daughters, brothers, sisters, the ones that they are not here anymore, the ones that they didn't make it, but they made it. They will be in a history forever, and they will be in a history forever. Thank you.
It is my pleasure to introduce Pat Engel, the spouse of the chairman of the House of Foreign Affairs Committee, U.S. Congressman Eliot Engel. Congressman Eliot Engel is a champion for fighting of democracy and human rights throughout the world and a staunch advocate for justice for all victims and war survivors. Congressman Eliot fought ethnic cleansing in the 1999 Kosovo War and voiced support in Congress for the 2008 Kosovo Declaration of Independence. Let us welcome his beautiful wife, Pat Engel.
Thank you, everyone, and good morning. And thank you for allowing me to speak today on behalf of my husband, Congressman Eliot Engel, who must be in Washington today. More than 20 years ago, wars ravaged the Balkans, and today we shine a light on how the victims of crimes committed who are still seeking justice so many years later. There are many details that I could go into right now and historical facts, but you already know them. What I want to say is that some of the solutions sought, like a special court, did not work. So what we might be able to look forward to is that a law created a specialist chamber that allows the prosecutor to indict anyone who committed war crimes. Anyone. To this day, that court only seems to be pursuing Albanians. And I would suggest, on behalf of my husband, who has vowed that he will monitor the specialist chambers to see that it addresses all perpetrators of all war crimes, which can be prosecuted under this jurisdiction. This is why your demonstration today is so vital. It is so important to have you here. Your voices must be heard. The voices of the victims must be heard. They deserve to go to court and face the people who perform these horrible atrocities. It is absolutely critical that we hear firsthand from those who were brutalized by the hands of Belgrade so many years ago. My husband and I support your efforts to achieve justice. I want to thank a few people. If I have many friends here today, I want to just thank all of you for being here, but I want to give a special thanks to my dear friend Harry Bakhtari, Councilman Mark Donai, the American Albanian Women's Organization, who I hold dear to my heart, Vasvihe Krasniqi Goodman, also here, a very brave woman who I have known and I love dearly. Thank you to all the groups that are here, the Albanian, Bosnian, and Croatian-American communities. I truly believe justice delayed is justice denied.
I'm pleased to introduce one of our dear friends, Ambassador William Walker, head of the OSCE mission in Kosovo, who was the first international to witness the massacre of Recek, where 45 ethnic Albanian civilians, including elderly and children, were massacred by Serbian forces. Let's give a warm welcome to our friend, Ambassador William Walker.
You know, for 2 decades, I was a Foreign Service officer of the United States who had been sent to the Balkans, much to my surprise, since I barely knew where the Balkans were. But in 1997, I was first sent by the United Nations to Croatia to try and help the Croats and the Serbs reconcile after a very bitter war in Croatia. Next, I was sent to Kosovo, where I headed up the Kosovo verification mission, and there it was a little different. The war was going on. People were being killed in the streets. It was a very, very difficult situation. And I got there and spent about 6 months with about 1,400 internationals from all over Europe. It was a big mission, and we were there to tell the world what was happening in Kosovo. So, with those 3 different assignments, I had 2 very interesting ones in which I got to know Slobodan Milosevic. In Croatia, I met him because I was there trying to protect Serbs from what might happen if the Croatian army came in after the war and did bad things. So there I was a friend of Serbia and kind of a friend of Slobodan Milosevic. Obviously, when I went to Kosovo, it was a very different situation. There, Slobodan Milosevic quickly saw that the KVM, the mission I headed, was going to tell the truth about what was happening in Kosovo, and he did not like that, so I became persona non grata from the government in Belgrade. Again, the differences were that in Croatia, I was there after the war. I didn't personally see any war crimes committed, but I certainly heard a lot about how women were treated, how women were violated, and a million other stories of war crimes by both sides. In Kosovo, I had a different experience. There I was there, as I said, during the war. War crimes were being committed on a daily basis, and I obviously heard a number of times about soldiers, about paramilitaries who were abusing women, who were raping women, who were doing terrible things to women. That was the reality. And what happened in Racak was a very different sort of war crime. But when I got up and said what we had seen, what I had seen the day after that massacre, in my opinion, that started things rolling towards what we now have, which is a free and independent Kosovo. The reality that I saw in Kosovo was the total subjugation, the total humiliation by the government in Belgrade, by the security forces, by all the paramilitaries that came in. And as I say, they were doing everything to subjugate, to terrorize the people of Kosovo. Luckily, fortunately, the UÇK trying to win a war, but I don't think they ever would have won it without the arrival of NATO. When the NATO bombing campaign, I and 1,400 internationals went into exile in Macedonia. And what did we do in Macedonia and sometimes in Albania? We went from one concentration camp of refugees, those who had been pushed out of Kosovo in the genocidal policy of the Slobodan Milosevic government. And every day for 3 months, 4 months during the bombing campaign, I and 1,400 internationals visited the camps, talked to the victims, And I personally spoke to many young women, old women, girls who were the victims of sexual abuse and rape. It was horrendous. Talking first person in the immediate aftermath of what they had gone through trying to escape the genocide that was happening in Kosovo. Those were horrible days. I had face-to-face personal experience talking to the victims. So I think I know how rape, how sexual violence was used as a tool of war, as an instrument of war, which should never be condoned, should always be condemned, and those who commit those sort of crimes, as this group demonstrates, should be brought to justice for prosecution. I'm not talking about the individual soldiers who committed rapes. You will never get justice from that. I am talking about the leaders, the commanders. I'm talking about the people in Belgrade who promoted, who condoned the use of rape as a tool of war. They are the war criminals. They are the ones that should be brought to justice. I am very, very much in favor of demonstrations like this, even if the weather's not so good, even if it's a kind of a busy street in New York on a work day. But 30 years later, we are still waiting for justice for the crimes that were committed in Bosnia-Herzegovina. 25 years later, we are waiting for justice for the crimes that were committed in Croatia. 20 years later, we are still waiting for justice for the victims of the crimes that were committed in Kosovo. And as I say, that third group I had personal knowledge of and personal experience with. Anyone who doubts the magnitude, the horrors of the violence against women in Kosovo during the genocidal war should read the human rights report that was collected by my verifiers, that was put together in the aftermath of the war, of the bombing, by going into the refugee camps and talking to the women survivors. Hundreds, thousands of first-person accounts of rape and violence. It's a very, very telling book, and anyone who reads it will surely demand justice for those who committed those crimes. When the war in Kosovo ended, and when Slobodan Milosevic was taken to The Hague, where I was proud to go and testify against him, I think we all thought that Serbia, new governments coming in, were going to show the world that this was a modern Serbia. This was not the Serbia of Slobodan Milosevic, and that war criminals, war crimes that had been committed would be prosecuted. Unfortunately, in my opinion, the crimes that have come after Milosevic have continued to deny, have continued to say those crimes never happened. We do not harbor war criminals. The crimes of the Kosovo War, the crimes of the Croatian War, the crimes of the Bosnia-Herzegovina incidents are still being denied by the, quote, new and non-Milosevic governments of Serbia. That has got to change, and I am glad to see this group here today because I think this will help change it. I will close by saying the last time I was with a crowd like this, people with great enthusiasm for the cause, had a very different reason. It was about 10 or 11, 12 years ago when I went to the first meeting of Vet Vindosje in Kosovo. And 10 years ago, everybody said, Walker, you shouldn't go to that meeting because Vet Vendosa has no chance of succeeding politically. 10 years later, Vet Vendosa, as we all know, just won the election. Some people think I'm with Vet Vendosa. I'm not. But I want to say it took 10 years, but Vet Vendosa, by their enthusiasm, by holding rallies like this, by getting people excited about their cause, was able to accomplish a great deal and are now the government of Kosovo. So I hope it doesn't take you 10 years to bring justice for the war crimes committed by the Serb military and paramilitary. I just wish you luck. I'll do whatever I can to help, but let's get some justice for the victims of rape and war crimes in the Balkans. Thank you very, very much.
Often afraid to speak about their experience. Okay, so they are often afraid to speak about their experience and what they went through during the war. Following the peace accords, Bosnia and the international community failed to give a justice to these women, particularly regarding judiciary reforms. Yet, none of these reforms never reflected experiences of the post-war peace. In such a traditional justice processes, women have been largely absent from political decision-making, demonstrating a clear lack of the feminist lead perspective and gender-responsible inclusion concerning the women's rights and survivors of wartime rape. In Bosnia today, we deal with the 5 main problems when it comes to conflict-related sexual violence. The number of war crime cases that involve sexual violence and rape that have been prosecuted on the national and entity courts is extremely low. All this is a fight against impunity, which remains as a top priority in Bosnia and the Balkans. The post-war narrative marginalizes a woman's experiences, both as the victims, as the combats, perpetrators, and peacemakers. The victims of conflict-related sexual violence, socially and economically, are still marginalized, and there have been no competitive reparation programs which would help them to re-socialize. Complicated legal framework in my country, as you know, we have 186 ministries, 10 cantons, few entities, Brčko district, insane, political systems, doesn't provide comprehensive report program to readdress the human rights violation. State service for the victims of conflict-related sexual violence and rape is completely absent. And in the meantime, women organizations have stepped out to assist the victims, same as we see here, the Albanian Women Organization. With all this, what the women in Bosnia, and I'm going to talk in the name of many of them because I've been working with them for many years, what they are requesting is that we must demand the prosecution and punishment for the perpetrators of conflict-related sexual violence. And we has to demand the justice for victims. Without justice, there is no peace. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for bringing me here. This is just beginning. We need to continue, we need to fight, and we need to stick together. So it was a huge privilege to be here with you today.
Thank you, Wilma. The next person that I'm going to introduce, the Ambassador of Goodwill from Kosovo for the International Human Rights Commission. Among the many campaigns she has led, one of the most important projects that she's launched has been the awareness campaign against discrimination of survivors of sexual violence during the Kosovo War. Let's welcome Ilvana Shala.
Thank you. My heroines, Ms. Vasfia and Ms. Shareta, I am here for you. We are here for you, and we will be always by your side. As the first Goodwill Ambassador for Kosovo, appointed by the International Human Rights Commission all around the world, I have always spoken with pain and pride for Kosovo. I spoke with pain about its past, the cruel war and crimes committed by the Serbian state that left indelible marks on the history of mankind. The weapon of sexual rape, over 20,000 women and men, was the most widely used act in Kosovo war. From that day, the voice of these victims was unheard of. Unheard of for fear, unheard of for the pain they feel, and unheard of for not punishing the criminals who committed this act. Looking closely at this situation in 2017, I launched the awareness campaign against discrimination of these victims called A Ray of Light, to seek the light denied 20 years, to seek justice and to break any prejudices against them. Throughout the campaign, I met with the organizations that work with them, and most importantly, I met with the victims whose story was hard enough to hear, let alone to live. A cruel story, a crime that cannot be described in words. During all this time, the victims had only one request: justice, justice, and justice. Justice denied for 20 years, justice delayed for 20 years, and justice unpunished for 20 years. That's why we are here today. Therefore, from this stage, I seek justice for the victims who are our heroines today. I seek peace and stability in every state, and this is achieved only when criminals receive the deserved punishment. I, you, we, all together are here for you and your sacrifice. So what I would like to say in the end is, I have a question for the Serbian ambassador here in New York. Do you think that you can live in peace if this would be happen to your mothers, sisters, and all of your citizens? Of course not. Do you think that we can live in peace if there is no justice? Of course not. So we are not stopping to seek justice until the criminals will be punished. Justice and justice and justice for our heroes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilvana. I'm proud to introduce a professor of the International and Public Affairs at Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs. She's an expert, published author, and commentator in politics and media development, human rights, gender issues, and human trafficking. Please welcome Professor Tanya Dormi.
Thank you so much, Councilman Ganai. I first of all, I would like to thank the Albanian American Women's Organization for organizing this tremendous rally here in Midtown, New York. Your voices are bouncing off these buildings. I have to say something personal. I am the granddaughter of an Albanian grandmother who was born in Fear, Albania. And I learned at a very young age how strong Albanians are. She taught me what it meant to be a strong woman, to be put on a boat through an arranged marriage and came to this country through Ellis Island. I learned so much, and I think of her right now, how much she would be so proud of all of us here today, fighting for justice. So I want to thank everyone for showing up today, because by showing up, that is when justice begins. when we give witness to the survivors, when we give witness to the crimes that took place against you and your families, when we give witness and we give strength to the fight that is ahead of us. I want to mention that in 1991, I was working for Congressman Frank McCloskey as his defense policy analyst on Capitol Hill when the war broke out in Croatia. And this is when I began this intimate journey of working on the issues related to the Balkans, and then eventually going and working in Sarajevo for 4 years immediately after the war. And I want everybody to know that I acknowledge the survivors. The survivors are the key to breaking the silence, to breaking the silence. They are so courageous. And I want to acknowledge Vasvia Goodman here, who spoke to all of us. She is so brave. There were 2 women in Bosnia I want to tell you about, Nusreta Šivac and Jadranka Sigle. They were a judge and a lawyer living in Bosnia and were enslaved in a rape camp. And when they were enslaved, they somehow survived it after a long period of time. And eventually they became refugees in Croatia. And in Croatia, these judges and lawyers put their skills to paper, and they interviewed all the survivors. They got 200 testimonies from survivors in the refugee camps of Croatia. These were Bosnian survivors. And they took those testimonies to The Hague, to the International Criminal Tribunal of former Yugoslavia, and they made the case that the prosecutors must charge rape as a war crime. And in fact, that is what they accomplished. So eventually, a case was tried, the Focha case, where the judge and the court in The Hague determined that not only is rape a war crime, it is a crime against humanity. It is a crime of torture, and it is a crime that has the legal elements that can determine an outcome of genocide. Those women survived Focha and testified. Those survivors broke the silence. And so we join and we follow and stand on their shoulders. This must be a sustained campaign for the justice of the victims, a campaign that calls on all of our allies. And I want to say to the councilman, if I can help bring the Bosnian community, all of us together, the Bosnian community in Astoria is 40,000 people. All of us together can put pressure on this government in Belgrade. So I want to also thank my friend and brother Ilir Batici and his family that are here today, because we have been walking together working on the justice for his family, and he is here in solidarity with the survivors of this horrible crime. Standing together, we are stronger. Breaking the silence, we lift the shame off the shoulders of the survivor. When breaking the silence, we call on the Serbian government to render and submit to the rule of law. End impunity, end the genocide denial. And let me just say, we will never tire. We will never yield until justice is done.
Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia!
Shame. The next guest speaker has been working with survivors of war crimes for the past 20 years. Dr. Farida Rushdie is the founder and executive director of the Kosovo Rehabilitation Center for Torture Victims. Her bold commitment in the field of rehabilitation, human rights, research, and advocacy has awarded her the International Award for Courageous Women from the U.S. Department of State. Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Farida Rushdie.
Mirdita, dritoret janë mbyll, po e sheni, ha? Okay.
Shame on you!
Shame on you! Well, first of all, thank you very much for being here. I would like to thank you in the name of the Kosovo Rehabilitation Center for Torture Victims. And I would like also to thank you two ladies, Wasfie and Jurete, for the brave work they are doing not only here, but in all parliaments of Europe. They would like to raise justice through their voice. Sexual violence is the most dirty weapon in the hands of dictators and criminals, which is applied to destroy innocent people's souls. Almost 2 decades of the war, conflict-related sexual violence in Kosovo are still waiting. They are waiting for justice, long overdue reparation and recognition of what they've gone through. Among them, there were girls, women, men and boys who have been pulled by the Serbian police, paramilitary and soldiers from the columns of refugees fleeing Kosovo and being raped, sometimes over and over again. What makes this crime harder is the rape took place in the presence of family. It happened in the presence of their children, parents and husbands. Working with war survivors since 1999 under the Kosovo Rehabilitation Center for Torture Victims, I heard hundred unspoken testimony, which speaks for multiple incidents of rape which produce children, pain and suffering, not only to survivors but also to their family and community at large. For most of the survivors, life after torture and rape becoming agonizing, which increased gender inequality, violence and domestic violence, psychological consequences, shame and blame, and a lot of psychosocial consequences. Many stories have been attempted to be cancelled, hidden, buried in the circle of family due to stigma and culture of prejudice. In my experience, I heard a lot of sharing stories. A pregnant woman who was raped and her dream to be a mother never been achieved. A young girl of 9 years who was such an innocent child, and she was shocked from crazy party behavior of the perpetrator, which broke her dreams and destroyed her entire life. Sometimes the stories are so horrific and the consequences so complex that life after torture and rape becoming so agonizing for survivors that some of the survivors do not recognize themselves anymore. When it comes to sexual violence, there are a notion of shame and blame, but don't we make a big mistake and we fail to the trap of the perpetrators? Because there is the only crime when we shame and blame the victim instead of perpetrators. And do you know why? Because there is no justice and truth about this crime. No single perpetrator was persecuted for such a horrific crime in our countries. More than 2 decades, we are struggling and fighting with survivors to empower legal recognition and social justice through the psychosocial and economical program. But the ultimate request from the survivors is that they want to be heard. They want justice. They want justice. Justice now. Therefore, we stand and we speak up the survivors' voice today in the front of Serbian Consulate for their fundamental rights, right to justice and make perpetrator accountable. How is possible survivors and their family to continue their daily life and have peace in their mind and in their soul when none of the perpetrators was punished for such a crime? While we are here to speak up for justice for survivors, beyond the ocean, in my country, Kosovo, every single day survivors are dying. With them goes part of hidden history of 1999. Isn't it embarrassing for Serbian country to not accept all of those atrocities and bringing perpetrators accountable? We cannot create sustainable peace without accepting and acting towards this crime. Therefore, we are here to raise our voice in the front of Serbian embassy to take action immediately and change the culture of injustice to find impunity. Only in this way we can prevent the cycle of violence in the region and repair dignity of the survivors. Therefore, we stand here to ask for the justice on behalf of the family and on behalf of the survivors. Without justice and truth, the region cannot build the peace. The new generation in the Balkans deserve to know the true narratives. Without truth, reparation and justice for war rape survivors, we cannot build the future and sustainable peace in the region. So be their voice for the justice. Time to act now with a concrete action. Time to justice for the survivors. No time for the delay. Thank you very much for being all of you here. Thank you, Motra Chirazi. Thank you, all of Leslie Bitucci. Thank you, Councilman Jonai, and thank you all of you for being us today and standing with the survivors. Justice for survivors.
Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia!
No peace!
No justice, no peace! No justice, no peace! No justice, no peace!
We have with us today's leaders and tomorrow's leaders that will represent us in politics. Running for Westchester County legislator, we have Vedat Ghashi. So if you live in Westchester, vote Vedat Ghashi Tuesday.
Thank you so much for inviting me up here. Thank you all for coming out here today. I don't want to take up too much time for these amazing speakers and the amazing message they have, but I really appreciate you all coming, and we need to get more attention to this, so we got to continue giving this message out. Thank you so much, and God bless.
Let's give it up for Vedat Ghashi. Short and sweet, something politics can use. Let's introduce someone that's not a stranger to this community. You all know him as Marco, the parade guy from Albanian roots, but now we're going to introduce him as Marco Kepi, running for New York State Assembly, the 64th District in Staten Island. Let's give it up for Kepi.
Mirdita, it's a shame that 20 years after the war, we have to get here today again to fight again against Serbia, who today still commits crimes against the innocent people of Albania, Bosnia, and Croatia, that they still refuse to give back the dead bodies that are buried in mass graves in Serbia. Even today, Serbia wants to play dirty politics in democracy. So it's a shame that we're here today, but we should be here every year, every single year, to tell Serbia that we do not forget our brothers and sisters, and we will fight for them each and every day until they are resting in their peaceful place back in their home. So thank you for standing up here today with our Councilman Mark Jonai, and hopefully in the coming years there will be 4, 5, 6, 7 Mark Jonais, so Serbia knows not to mess with the Albanian people and the people of the Balkans. Thank you, and God bless each and one of you.
No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.
No justice, no peace.
I want to make sure that Serbia hears this crowd on this rainy day and hears the message loud and clear. Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia!
Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia!
Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia!
Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia! Shame on Serbia!
I'm glad to introduce a Croatian-American actress and writer, Ella Mish was voted #1 in 40 under 40 most successful young Croatians in diaspora in 2018. Among many projects that she has worked on, Ella is currently writing a film based on survivors of sexual violence from Vukovar. Let's welcome Ella Mish.
Thank you very much. I'm here today speaking on behalf of Croatian women, Albanian and Bosnian women. It was said, I read the other day, "You haven't done anything to us. You are guilty because you're Croatian." A Serbian aggressor said to a woman, who then with other 8 soldiers he proceeded to rape for over days and days. Her husband and child were taken to concentration camps to be killed, and her daughter's cries were muffled with jackets of those 8 men. As I've learned 1,000 of these stories like this woman and some of the women I personally know living in Vukovar whose rapists still walk freely on those streets, mocking them, I'm left with nothing but questions. I wonder where those men are and all the other men who have raped over 70,000 of Bosnian, Croatian, and Albanian women 20 years later. They're free among us because justice was never served still. Why is it that when you're a woman from Vukovar and you say that you were taken to Velepromet concentration camp in Vukovar after interrogating where men were taken away to be killed and women were taken to be raped in a sex camp they put later in front of firing squad, they have a hard time believing you and 1,000 of others, cases unresolved still. It's 21st century, and I would go and say that we're all of these horrifying stories are violations of fundamental principles of international law, and equally important, go against all standard of human decency, or plainly put, animalistic. Suppression and silence are just as much of a crime as wrongdoing themselves. And to that Chetnik Serbian who said to the woman, "You have not done anything to us and you are guilty just because Croatian," I would say you are guilty of a rape and murder, and how does that feel forever? I pray for justice, I pray for peace, and women who are the survivors for the biggest world crimes, and I pray for this silence to be broken so they can hear us forever. It takes a woman to give life, so don't let the wrong men destroy it. Thank you.
Serbia!
Shame on you!
Serbia!
Shame on you!
Serbia!
Shame on you!
Serbia! Shame on you! Serbia! Shame on you!
Women
Serbia!
matter!
Women matter! Women matter! Women matter! Women matter! Women matter!
What do you want?
Justice!
What do you want?
Justice!
What do you want?
Justice!
When do you want it?
Now!
At the end of the Kosovo War in 1999, 3 American citizens, 3 brothers, Uli, Agran, and Mehmet, were murdered. They were executed and dumped into a mass grave in Serbia. 20 years later, there are some answers, but no justice. A couple of months ago, their brother, Ilir Batucci, testified before the U.S. Congress, calling for justice on the Batucci brothers' case. The price that this family has paid is unmeasurable. Please recognize Ahmet and Baida and Ilir Batucci.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody, for being here on this rainy day. As I hope to make it clear today, in support of Albanian, American, American Bosnian, Bosnian-American Croatian victims of war crimes have a voice. The voice is justice. We will be heard. War criminals will not go unpunished. Justice delayed is justice denied. Far-failed victims of sexual violence, torture, murder of Kosovo, Bosnia, and Croatian war victims will not be ignored. Using sexual violence on a victim during war is a war crime and can't go unpunished. We need justice. Justice delayed is justice denied. My name is Ilir Vitucci. On behalf of my family and other victims of war crimes committed during the war in Kosovo, my family has suffered the horrific, heinous, barbaric crime of my 3 young brothers, American citizens, on their hands of the war criminals of Serbia, which still today are employed in high-ranking places within the Serbian government. My brothers were sent to these killing camps in Petrovo Selo, not because they were Albanians. They were murdered and executed because they were Americans. I'm here to offer you, the victims, and the world one simple message. We cannot be ignored. Justice must be served if you want lasting peace in Balkans. We cannot be ignored. If you, Serbia, want a good relations with the surrounding neighbors, justice must be served. We cannot be ignored. Today, as a deaf whispers a voice of the victims around the world in support of justice, we cannot be ignored. Deniability is accountability for mass atrocities. We cannot be ignored. If you want tens of thousands of families who were victimized by the war crimes in Kosovo, Bosnia, Croatia to find closure and peace, we need justice. We cannot be ignored. Thank you, everybody. Mark Jonay, Congressman Engel, the American Albanian communities, thank you for taking your time and coming out. Thank you. God bless you all.
We will not rest until all war crimes are punished, until all war criminals are brought to justice. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.
No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.
Shame on Serbia. Shame on Serbia. Shame on Serbia. Shame on Serbia.
Shame on Serbia. Shame on Serbia. Shame on Serbia. Shame on Serbia. Shame on Serbia.
I'm glad to introduce a Croatian-American singer, songwriter, and designer. During the war in her homeland of Croatia, Tommy has performed countless of humanitarian concerts, raising money for children left without parents, families affected by the war, and reconstruction of the houses of worship. Let us welcome Tommy Michelle.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming and supporting this very important cause. Rape is considered one of the most powerful weapons in the war. The horror and the facts are incalculable and permanent. Today, October 28, 2019, 23 years after the war are done, we're still seeking a status of the war victims, and we're still seeking to bring the criminal to justice and to be punished. Vukovar, 1991. Baby Sunny was only 8 months old when she was trapped with her mother in the city of Vukovar. She and her mother were captive in an apartment. Her mother was subject of multiple rapes by Serbian soldiers. And dear all, this is her testimony. My name is Jacqueline. I lived in Vukovar. I was only 18 years old in 1991 when war began. My daughter was 8 months old when Vukovar occupied by Serbian soldiers. They kept me in an apartment there alone with my daughter and my 8-year-old sister. After multiple rapes and torture, they took me to the concentration camp. They kept me, my sister, and my child there for many, many months. My sister and I were raped and tortured every day. We suffered terribly. When they raped me, they would throw the heavy uniform on my baby to muffle her cries. And by some kind of miracle, my baby Sonny survived. After being released from concentration camp, I returned to Vukovar, where I lived for 3 years, but I couldn't bear to live there because friends of the people who tortured me in the camp threatened that my daughter would have same destiny as me. These are the words of the rape victim that criminal never brought to the justice. In the name of each tear of the baby's face, in the name of tired voices of 70,000 raped victims in Bosnia, in Kosovo, and in Croatia, I urge you to elevate your voices. I'm urging you for truth to be told and keep repeating the truth until crimes like this are brought to the justice. I'm urging neighboring country of Serbia to wake its consciousness, to choose to walk tall under this shared universe. Thank you, everybody, and my God bless you, and God bless the country of America, who gave us the freedom to speak what bothers us and what needs to be brought to the justice. Thank you.
Rape is a war crime. Rape is a war crime. Rape is a war crime. Rape is a war crime.
Rape is a war crime. Rape is a war crime. Rape is a war crime. Rape is a war crime.
What do you want?
Justice.
When do you want it?
Now.
What do you want?
Justice.
When do you want it?
Now.
There is no peace without justice. Help me welcome Mimosa Ferretti, an Albanian American activist and fighter for democracy in Albania. Let's give a warm welcome to Mimosa Ferretti.
Faleminderit për pjesëmarrjen. I would prefer to speak English, so this way the world can hear us, and the ambassador of Serbia to hear me. When I grew up, I was 18 years old. My father fought for Kosovo back on 1944. He was the leader in Second War. And when I went to college, he told me, Mimosa, don't forget, Albanian woman is untouchable. Albanian woman is untouchable. You can touch Albanian house, yes. You can come and welcome there, and you can say welcome. You can destroy our clothes, but if you touch Albanian woman, it's no excuse, and it's not forgivable. To the ambassador of Serbia, I'm going to tell him again, you can touch no woman in the world, and you can touch, especially Albanian women. We don't forget, intellectual justice is in place. Justice for all. Justice against every man who touch women. Justice to all women in the world. Justice.
What is Belgrade to make of your demonstration and your protest? What message do you send Belgrade for the atrocities, the war crimes, the loss of life, the devastation that was posed on an innocent people? Make sure they hear this each and every day. And that message is Serbia must pay for it. What does Serbia do? Pay for it. 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 I want to thank all of you for being here today. Thank you for being a voice for the voiceless. Thank you for reminding our people back home that we have not forgotten their pain and their suffering. God bless you. God bless the Albanian people, the Bosnian people, the Croatian people. God bless our survivors. God bless America. USA! USA!
USA!